Relax lang kayo.
Sir, 40 minutes, take na tayo.
Ikaw ba na? Yan.
Nasaan yung mama? Last time lang, pa. Last time lang.
Yung ano?
Grab dito yan, grab.
Tayo ano?
Okay.
Bilhin niyo mamaya.
Sa bawat. Pasok kami 11 na. Bel, ghost door na rin.
Sige, start na.
Ghost door.
Ayun, dalawa.
Start na. Okay. Parang may beer. Off ka ng... Off ka
Computer sa akin yung ano, PowerPoint.
Okay ba? Or...
Okay pa. Ganda. Nandito na ba lahat?
Opo.
Okay. Sige po.
Good morning.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. So, it's me again. Ako po pala si Architect Dayan. So, for today, i-discuss natin is BP 220 and then PB 957. But now we'll start with BP 220, or the Economic and Socialized Housing. Ito yung table of contents natin for this lecture. Clear po ba yung boses ko? Mahirap? Or narinig po ba ng lahat?
Yes. Narinig ko.
So, we'll be discussing yung introduction, definition of terms, subdivision design, single-family dwellings, and then multiple-family dwellings. So, by part siya. So, ano nga ba yung BP 220? So, BP 220 was enacted on March 25, 1982. So, BP 220 is Batas Pambansa bilang 220 or Economic and Socialized Housing. So, itong batas na to, this sets the standards for economic and socialized housing. Like, yung minimum requirements niya sa housing projects in urban and rural areas under itong mga other related building laws like PD 957, PD 1216, and then PD 1096. Familiar naman po lahat kung ano yung mga related laws na ito, diba? So, yun na nga po. Yung economic and socialized housing, yun yung mga housing units na within yung affordability level ng mga low-income earners, which is equal to 30% ng gross family income. So, ang nagde-determine sa kanya is yung National Economic and Development Authority, which is NEDA. So, BP 220 is also under PD 1096, which is the National Building Code of the Philippines, and then RA 9514, which is the Fire Code of the Philippines. So anything na which is not stated in BP 220 will have to follow the National Building Code and RA 9514, which is the Fire Code of the Philippines. So, and then for economic and socialized housing, may mga price ceilings tayo from HLURB. Sino nakakaalam ng meaning ng H?
Housing plan.
And land use.
Regulatory.
Yes, yun po. So sila yung nagsaset ng standards sa price ceiling. So pinakabababa with the lowest requirements is the socialized housing. So it's any housing development or units that is 400K and below. And then susunod yung low cost plan, which is 300K to 1.25 million. And then low cost 2, which is from 1.25 million to 2 million. And then medium cost housing, which is parang nasa higher range na siya, is 2 million to 4 million. And then yung pinakamataas is the open market, which is 4 million pesos and above. So this is the hierarchy. So we have 6 basic needs of human settlement. So this is, yung arrangement ito is by descending order. Yung pinaka-importante of course is water. This is the most important basic needs of human settlement. And then second is yung movement and circulation, storm drainage, solid and liquid waste disposal, parks and playgrounds, and power. So yeah, number 7 ba, internet? So yeah, but yeah, this is like the 6 most basic needs of human settlement according to BP 220.
Wow,
So by descending order po to, minsan sa exam, tatanungin sa inyo kung ano yung like, what is like, yung hierarchy niya. Kung ano yung mas importante, for example. Like yung storm drainage ba, mas importante sa tubig. So like, kailangan yung i-note sometimes sa mga
Nag-arrangement.
Opo, yun. So kailangan natin tandaan siya by order. So, moving forward sa definition of terms. So, yun nga, as discussed, socialized housing, ito yung mga housing projects undertaken by the government. So, yung mga LGUs, this is for underprivileged and homeless citizens. So, sa Pilipinas, makikita natin marami silang mga projects. Like, for example, sa Quezon, sa Navotas, socialized housing projects para sa mga tao which is underprivileged and homeless. And also people who have been hit by like natural calamities, mga nawalan ng bahay. So the housing projects that the government provides for those people is called socialized housing. And then the next hierarchy naman is the economic housing. So these are housing projects provided to average income families. So, yun, next, affordable cost. So, pag sinabi natin affordable cost, yun yung binibigay ng government na most reasonable price based on needs and capabilities ng beneficiaries. So, minsan, nakadepende siya sa capabilities ng beneficiary na magbayad. So, yun. So, it's under Urban Development and Housing Act of 1992, which is called RA 7279. So then, what is a dwelling? So a dwelling is like a house. So yun yung building designed and used as a residence. So either for one or more families. So meron tayong single family dwelling. So dito sa single family dwelling, isang pamilya lang per lote dapat. And then pag multiple family dwelling naman, so it's a dwelling sa isang lote, pero separate living units for multiple families. So parang isang lote, pero multiple families pwede sa kanya. So multiple family dwelling. So this usually provided with common access, services, and the use of lands. So may common access and services for separate units and multiple families. And then we also have community facilities. So ito yung mga facilities na intended to serve the common needs of those who are residing in that community project or in that socialized housing. So for example, multi-purpose centers, schools, and drugstores. And the more na lumalaki yung socialized housing project, the more na lumalaki din yung requirement for community facilities. So mamaya, discuss po natin if yung numbers, may table kasi siya, if ano yung mga multi-purpose and community facilities na required based on the number of the dwelling units and the area of the socialized and economic housing projects. So, here naman, this is like a type of dwelling unit. First one is single detached. So this is a dwelling unit na isang family lang completely surrounded by open spaces. So, it means na hindi siya connected to other separate lots or dwelling units. So, mag-isa lang siya. So when we say duplex and single attached, so ito naman yung mga dwelling unit na nagka-contain ng 2 or more separate living units. So usually separated siya ng party wall or ng firewalls, which we will discuss later. Ano nga ba yung pagkakaiba ng party wall and the firewalls? But yeah, pag sinabi natin duplex or single attached, it's like 2 or more separate living units, and magkatabi lang sila but they're only separated by one wall, which is party wall or firewall. So included yung duplex and then quadruplexes. And then another type of dwelling unit we have is a row house. So for row house naman, a single attached dwelling containing 3 or more separate living units. So ito yung mga cluster units na magkakatabi lang sila. Multiple siya. I think maximum of 20 units kapag row house. So yan, it is also separated from each other by party walls. So mamaya may mga visual presentation kung ano yung itsura niya. But then, ito naman, what is a shell house? So shell house, habitable dwelling unit siya, pero ang included lang sa kanya is just like the shell, outer shell of the house. So kasama yung exterior walls, yung floor, openings for door and windows, plumbing fixtures, and electrical wiring. So what is like the basic which is needed to build like a house? Pero hindi pa kasama yung partition walls and then like the doors and windows itself. So it's like just like literally the shell of the house. And then when we say a complete house, yun na yung shell house plus all the windows and doors, and then included na pati yung partition walls niya. Okay. So ito na nga, ang firewall is any wall which separates two abutting living units plus required extensions. So ang difference ng firewall and party wall is, of course, firewall is fire rated. Party wall is used to, it's a wall used jointly by two parties under easement agreement. So parehas siyang nasa linya separating two parcels of land, but a party wall can be a firewall, but a firewall cannot be a party. Baliktad. A party, a firewall. Ay, mamaya. But yan, ang party wall usually, sometimes hindi siya fire rated. So yan, a block. Block naman is a parcel of land bounded on the sides of the streets occupied by or intended for building. So mamaya po, papakita ko yung parang visual representation ng block. And then when we say an alley, it's a public way, 2 meters wide and intended to break a block. So with both ends connecting to the streets. So pag sinabi natin alley, hindi dapat siya gagamitin bilang access to property. So the intention of an alley is to break a block. So what is the maximum length of a block? It's 400. 400 meters, and then every ilang meters kailangan mo like 250. Yeah. So 250 every 250 meters kailangan is separate na siya ng alley, which is 2 meters wide. And then a pathwalk naman, it's also a public way, and that is intended for a pedestrian access to a property for socialized housing projects. So pag sinabi nating pathwalk, minimum width niya is 3 meters, and then ang maximum length niya is 60 meters. So ang pagkakaiba ng alley and pathwalk, minsan kasi nakakalito siya. Alley is always 2 meters, and then we cannot use it as an access to property, but a pathwalk, we can utilize it as an access for property. So moving forward sa subdivision design. So these are the planning considerations na kailangan natin i-consider. So unang-una, we have to avoid areas subject to flooding or hazards. So dito babalik yung 6 basic needs of human settlement. So ano nga ba yung kailangan nila and ano yung dapat nilang i-avoid. So we have to avoid areas subject to flooding or hazards or areas which will not cater to the 6 basic human needs of settlement. And then kailangan din natin i-preserve yung trees with a caliper diameter of 200 millimeters or greater. And then yung mga easement requirements set by other codes, we also have to follow that. Na-discuss na ba sa inyo yung National Building Code? Hindi pa. So like, pag na-discuss sa inyo yung National Building Code, it will mention yung mga easement requirements. And then, kailangan din, of course, kailangan mag-provide ng major streets and then extension for future connections. Kasi human settlement, it's always growing. So we have to think like future. And then, pagdating naman po sa saleable versus non-saleable sa BP 220, so wala siyang fixed ratio. And then, moving forward, sa parks and playgrounds, so kapag 1 hectare na and above is required na yung parks and playgrounds sa socialized and economic housing projects. And then, yung area allotted for parks and playgrounds, exclusive yun of areas for community facilities. And then basketball courts can also be added as like parts of community facilities. Yung minimum area required is expressed in percentage area as increases as density lots or hectare increases. So, the more na lumalaki yung area ng dwelling units or yung lote, the more na lumalaki yung number niya, the more na lumalaki din yung requirement for the minimum area of parks and playgrounds. But then the absolute minimum is always 100 square meters. And it's for projects that measure 1 hectare and above. So ito yung table niya ng parks and playgrounds allocation. So here, for example, we have economic housing and then socialized housing. So for example, if we have 150 dwelling units or plots and below, so yung allocation percentage ng parks and playgrounds, PP means parks and playgrounds, is 3.5%. This is for economic housing. So the more na tumataas yung number niya, the more na tumataas din yung percentage ng minimum requirement for parks and playgrounds. So, if halimbawa 201 to 225 na yung number of lots, then 7% na siya. So, mas tataas yung requirement niya. So, same for socialized housing din, ganun din. So, when you read the table, yun lang din yung tatandaan natin. Sometimes, tinatanong din to during the exam kung ano yung percentage ng gross area allocation for parks and playgrounds. So, pag mas mataas na siya sa 225 units per hectare, so additional 1% is required for every 10 units. So, yun yung pag-compute niya. Pag more than 225 units na siya per hectare, every 10 units, mag-additional kayo ng 1%. And then, ito yung sinasabi ko kanina, yung requirements for community facilities. So, pag yung project is 1 hectare or bigger, so mandatory na siya or required yung multi-purpose center. So, in this table, for example, we have here pag konti lang yung dwelling unit, if you see here, pag 10 and below, parang blank pa rin siya. So it means that hindi pa siya required yung community facilities. But the higher the number is, the higher the requirements are for the community facilities. Like for example here, pag 100 to 499 dwelling units na siya. So here we start to require a neighborhood multipurpose center. And habang mas lumalaki siya, mas lumalaki din yung requirement. Like pag 1,500 to 1,999, so dito, kailangan na natin ng multipurpose center, kailangan na ng convenience or retail center, and kailangan na rin ng elementary school. And so on. Like here, the highest number we have here is 2,500 to 3,000. So dito, pati tricycle terminal and high school, required na din siya. So yeah. And then for community facilities allocation, so ito din siya, nakadepende din siya sa number of density ng number of lots or dwelling units. So for example, 150 and below, yung allocation percentage ng gross area ng community facilities is 1. And then the more na tumataas siya, the more din na tumataas yung allocation of percentage of gross area. Andito pala, nakalimutan kong sabihin. Here, also take note of the asterisks that they have. So pag nakalagay dito na 1 asterisk lang, it means it's mandatory provision of the area. But pag 2 asterisks or 2 stars, so which is here, so it's optional saleable, but if provided lang sa plan. And then we also have yung circulation or road planning. So may hierarchy din yung circulation and road planning. So kailangan mag-provide ng minimum or road right-of-way widths within the subdivision. So this one. If these are numbers, so ayun. Same explanation lang din siya sa mga previous tables that we have had. So ito yung road right-of-way natin. So for example, we have here 2.5 and below. So ito yung mga required minimum right-of-way for economic housing and socialized housing. So for example, when we have above 10 to 15, then ito yung mga minimum dimensions ng road right-of-way. 10 meters for the major road, 8 meters for the collector road, pag minor road 6.5. So for economic housing and for socialized housing then. So they are just the same lang din naman, both economic and socialized housing. So ito po yung mga minimum sizes of roads natin. Yung pinakamalaki for circulation is the interconnecting road, which is 10 meters dapat siya. And then yung major road and collector road, parehas lang din yung minimum sizes nila. Parehas lang 8 meters. And then minor road, 6.5 meters. Motor court, which is used for cul-de-sac sometimes, is 6 meters. Path walk, 3 meters. And alley, 2 meters. So, yun. Inulit lang yung kanina na sinabi for economic and socialized housing, the difference between the path walk and an alley. So again, pag path walk, it provides pedestrian alley access to a property for socialized housing units only. And then an alley, again, it only breaks a block. So ito siya. This is a setback requirement along the main public road. This is for PUVs. So ito yung setback requirements niya. So it's 5 by 3 meters. ito yung papasok sa entry to the project, to the socialized or economic housing project. So we have to provide like setbacks for PUPs. And then also, required din yung planting strips and sidewalks. So, parehas lang yung requirements for socialized and economic housing. Planting strips are required under PD 953, implementing rules and regulations. So, this is the table for it. So, for example, if may right of way tayo na 15 meters, so these are the required width of the planting strips and sidewalks. So if economic housing and socialized housing, parehas lang sila. So if 15 meters yung right of way, 1.3 yung required na planting strips and sa sidewalk is 1.2. And then the more na lumiliit or lumalaki siya, nag-a-adjust din yung width ng required na planting strip and sidewalk. So both of them have the same number. So hindi nyo kailangan compare kasi parehas lang sila.
Na-apply siya both sides. Or
Mm-mm.
both sides.
Both sides na siya. So yun, yung nakalagay dito na PD 953, yun yung requiring the planting of trees in certain places and penalizing unauthorized cutting, destruction, damaging, and injuring of certain trees, plants, and vegetation. So yun yung PD 953. So yung key features niya, kailangan ng tree planting in subdivisions, open spaces, and yung mga designated areas. So, nag-a-apply siya both sa luma and bagong subdivisions. So, yun nga, bawal yung unauthorized cutting and destruction. So, usually, if kailangan mo magputol ng puno, kailangan talaga ng permit yan, kahit gaano kaliit. And then, for the road pavement naman, nung nag-exam kami, tinanong ata to, yung minimum thickness if asphalt or concrete. So ito siya, for major minor roads and model court for economic and socialized housing, dapat paved siya with asphalt and yung minimum thickness niya is 50 millimeters if asphalt. And then if concrete naman, minimum thickness niya is 150 millimeters. And then, yung minimum comprehensive strength niya din. And dapat, sidewalk and alley shall be of academic finish. So, I think both to pinanong sa amin during the exam. Okay. Ingat.
Thank you.
So, here meron tayong minimum lot areas. So, for socialized and economic housing, iba siya. Mas maliit yung minimum lot areas for socialized housing. So ito, kailangan nyo tandaan kasi usually lumalabas talaga ito sa exam. Yung nakakalito siya, but like pag tinandaan nyo siya, makita mo yung difference niya, then I think safe na kayo. Kasi minsan sa board exam, hindi lang siya, kasi 2 days yun, di ba? May first day, may building laws, and then morning yun, and then sa second day during design. So, yung building laws, usually, lumalabas siya both first day and second day. Kasi sa design, like a huge percentage ng questions, usually building laws, halo-halo siya. So, kapag inaral nyo na mabuti yung building laws, pagdating ng design, second day, parang, ano nila, parang, what do you call it? Bonus questions na lang sa inyo yun. Parang yun yung, parang, una niyong sasagutan. Kasi, alam ko na to, memorize ko na to. So, parang, ano na siya, makakabawas na siya sa ABCD. So, the more na you familiarize yourself with the figures, the more na mas madali na lang sa inyo sa design. So, I think 30-20% ng design for building laws. So, BP 220, BP 344, PD 957, National Building Code, yun. Kasi nung nag-exam ako, pinakauna kong sinagutan talaga yun sa building laws. Kasi yun parang pag nakita mo na yung tanong, matik na sa'yo, ito na yun. And then, yung analyzation, yung analogy ng design problem, to follow na yun. Habang sinasolve niya yung design problem. So, ito nga po siya. Going back, for socialized housing, single detached, 64 square meters. Pag duplex siya, 48 square meters. And pinakamaliit na lot areas always is row house. So for economic housing, yun naman, mas malaki yung figures niya kaysa sa socialized housing. So kailangan nyo din tandaan yung minimum lot frontage. Now, if alam nyo yung minimum lot frontage, ano lang siya, what do you call that, during the exam, if may makalimutan kayo, sometimes you can just use, like, pag naalala nyo yung minimum lot frontage, ano nyo na rin siya. You can also compute for the minimum lot areas. So, yun yung ginagawa ko minsan pag nakakalimutan ko. So, for example, for socialized housing, for row house, yung lot frontage niya is 3.5 meters lang. Sobrang liit niya lang. So, for duplex, 6 meters, both for socialized and economic. Interior lot, yung 3 meters lang talaga yung minimum lot frontage niya. So, maliit lang. So, BP 220, it sets the standards for like the pinaka-minimum requirements ng livable space. Yeah. So, for irregular lot, single detached, 4 meters, both socialized and economic, and same lang din sa regular lot and corner lot ng single detached. So we have to remember yung mga differences po niya ng single detached, duplex, and row house pagdating sa mga sizes nila. And then ito yung visual representation ng minimum lot ng single detached. So we have here, for socialized housing, ito yung minimum lot area, which is 64. Nandito nakalagay yung minimum lot frontage na rin. And this is also for economic housing. Ito yung nasa table kanina. And then for duplex naman, we can see here yung minimum lot frontage nila. And then the minimum area allocated for duplex for both socialized and economic housing. So for row house, ito din niya. For socialized housing, 3.5 meters, the minimum lot frontage, and then the minimum area, 28 square meters, and sa economic housing then, which is 36 square meters, and then 4 meters na minimum frontage. So, yeah, the maximum row house cluster is 20 units. And then, yung kanina discuss natin, yung subdivision block, so ito yung itsura niya ng block. And then, the maximum length is 400 meters. But then, kailangan siyang i-break ng alley for 250 meters or more. And then, for minimum floor areas, ito yung minimum floor areas. Super liit na lang. For socialized housing, it's 18 square meters. And then for economic housing, 22 square meters. So, pagkakaiba ng economic housing sa socialized housing is, pag socialized housing, it's just the shell house with doors and windows to enclose the units. Pero pag economic housing, it's literally a complete house with partitions inside and based on the submitted specifications of the projects. So yun na, pag socialized housing, wala pa siyang like partition walls, shell house lang siya with the minimum requirements ng doors and windows for enclosure. And then here we have the minimum setback. Yung minimum setback requirements ng BP 220 is iba sa minimum setback requirements sa National Building Code. So here, mas maliit yung setback required. For the front setback, 1.5 meters. Same lang siya sa side yard, but yung rear yard niya is 2 meters. So, parehas lang yung minimum setback requirements for both economic and socialized housing. And then, abutments, pwede siyang i-allow, but based on the National Building Code of the Philippines, which will be discussed soon. So, ito siya, the visual representation ng setback. For the front and side, 1.5 meters, and then for the rear is 2 meters. So, yeah, ito. For example, ito yung building footprint nyo. This is the lot area. So, this is the visual representation of the setback requirements. So, on to the next. Building design for single-family dwelling. So, again, access to property, path walks. Okay lang siya for socialized housing, but for economic housing, hindi. So, dito, we already have the courts. So, minimum dimension ng court is 2 meters. And then, ito yung visual representation niya. So, this is the court, and then, minimum dimension niya is 2 meters. And dapat may passage siya ng 1.2 meters going out to the yard or a street. So, for joining of courts, so for example, meron kayong multiple lots na magkakatabi. So, and you have 4 courts here. Required open space niya is 3 square meters. And then each dimension, dapat 2 meters yung side, and then yung other dimension is 1.5 meters. So, makikita mo siya dito. And the separation wall that separates the courts of those 4 magkakatabi na lote, dapat 2 meters yung maximum height niya. So, ito yung section niya. This is the representation ng dimensions. So, we have open space requirements for BP 220. So, mas malaki yung open space requirements ng interior lot sa BP 220, which is 50%. Sa National Building Code, 40% lang siya. Meanwhile, pag inside lot naman, 20% sa BP 220, and then in the National Building Code, it's 50%. And then, corner lot, pinakamaliit na open space requirements since it's abutted by 2 streets. So, 10% lang sa BP 220, yung open space requirements, and then National Building Code, it's 30%. So, yung ceiling height din natin sa BP 220, its minimum lang is 2 meters. So, sobrang mas mababa siya sa minimum ceiling height ng National Building Code. So, for ceiling height, it's 2 meters, but pag sa mezzanine, yung minimum is 1.8 meters. So, mababa lang siya. And then, pag less than 10 occupants, 1 exit. But if more than 10 yung occupants, dapat 2 yung exits. So, door heights, may difference din to sa National Building Code. For BP 220, 1.8 lang yung minimum door height for bathrooms and mezzanine doors. And then, para sa ibang mga pintuan sa bahay, 2 meters lang din siya. So, this is the minimum door width. Pag main door, 800 millimeters. Pag bedroom or service doors, 700. And then pag bathroom, 600 millimeters only. Yung minimum dimension or width ng doors. So, for windows naman po, for regular rooms, 10% dapat of the floor area. And then for bathrooms, 5% of floor area. I think similar lang to sa National Building Code. And then this is the maximum, minimum stairways. So pag sa riser, 250 millimeters yung maximum height niya. And then yung tread niya is 200 millimeters yung minimum. Yung width niya, yung lapad niya is dapat 600 millimeters. Minimum lang din yun. And dapat may headroom yung stairway ng 2 meters minimum. And landing to landing, 3.6 meters. So, ang handrail minimum niya is 800 millimeters. And then maximum is 1,200 millimeters from floor. And kapag less than 4 steps yung stairs nyo, hindi po required yung handrails. So kapag more than 4 steps na, 4 steps or more, that will require you to provide a handrail. Not less than 800 millimeters and not more than 1,200 millimeters. So this is like a visual representation yung ng stairways. Yung headroom niya, 2 meters, and then the maximum dapat to. Maximum. So, for circular stairways, so may be used if the required tread dimensions is provided at a point not more than 300 millimeters from the narrow end. And dapat yung minimum tread at any point is 150. This is a poor visual representation, but ito yung dimensions na makikita mo. Hindi dapat siya lilit yung minimum tread niya ng 150 millimeters. So, are ladders allowed? Yes. Pero dapat, magpo-provide kayo ng landing every 1.8 meters ng rise. If magpo-provide kayo ng ladders sa BP220. And then, sa firewall naman, it's required whenever a dwelling abuts on a property line. So, ito yung minimum thickness ng firewalls. Dapat 150 millimeters minimum thickness or 6-inch thick. And dapat may extension siya na 300 millimeters above the roof all throughout the building edges. And yung ceilings dapat within your property, hindi siya compartmentalized. So, dapat hindi siya continuous from one space to another. So, ito yung example ng firewall extensions. So, dapat ito extended siya by 30 centimeters on each building edge. And then, pati sa roof, kailangan extended din siya ng 0.30 meters. So, moving forward to the multiple family dwelling. So, again, path walks not allowed as property access. Pagdating dito. So, kapag multiple family dwelling na, the property must abut public street and hindi na allowed yung path walks as a property access. And pag multiple family dwellings, non-residential use may be allowed but only a percentage of the dwelling unit. So, pwede siyang ma-design as non-residential use, pero dapat compatible siya with the residential character. So, for example, if you are, uso sa Pinas kasi yun, di ba? Kapag kunwari dentista ka or doktor ka, so minsan yung clinic mo is nasa loob din ng bahay. So, for this multiple family dwelling unit, pwede siya, it's allowed. So, for example, private clinics, offices, private home offices, garage, and carports. So, dito, it says that maximum 25% ng total residential area yung pwede nyo gamitin for non-residential use. So, pag nagko-compute kayo ng non-residential use ng area, yung hallway and corridors na both nagsaserve sa non-residential and then sa residential, yung included na yun sa non-residential area. If yung hallway or corridor are both shared by residential and non-residential use. So, part yun ng kailangan yung ng area na i-compute yun for non-residential areas. So, dito naman, this is for buildings that is more than 1 story. So, ito yung distance ng buildings. So, for example, 1 to 2 story buildings. So, yung distance required between your 2 buildings, between 2 dwelling units is 4 meters siya. But between the roof eaves, 1.5 meters siya. So the more na tumataas yung buildings nyo, yung story ng buildings nyo, the more na tumataas din yung required distance between them. So if 3 to 4 story buildings, yung minimum required na distance is 6 meters between buildings, and then between the roof eaves, 2 meters. And then pag mas mataas na sa 4 stories, mas mataas rin yung required na distance. It's 10 meters between buildings, and then between the eaves, it's 6 meters. So this is like a visual representation of how it looks like. So ito, for example, if
One story, two
mhm.
story.
So dito makikita, between eaves, as per the table kanina, 1.5 meters yung required distance between the two sa building eaves ko. But then, from the face of the building,
Building line mismo.
building line po mismo, 4 meters dapat yung distance niya. So, same concepts sa the more na tataas yung buildings, but mas tataas yung number niya. So, ito, like this one, the distance between 3-story buildings. So, yung sa roof eaves niya, 2 meters yung minimum. And then, sa face of the building niya, 6 meters yung minimum niya. So, the higher it is, the higher the distance requirements. Pero, meron din siyang exception. So, pag may blank wall, for example, ano yung blank wall? Blank wall, ito yung mga wall na walang openings or minimal openings lang for comfort room. So, maliit lang ng window, for example. If both buildings is blank wall siya, what do you call that? If both buildings or both faces of the buildings is both like blank wall, like no window or
No
minimal openings. So there's an exception na minimum distance mas liit siya. So between buildings, imbes na 4 meters for example for 1 story, it's only 2 meters na lang siya between buildings. And between eaves, 1 meter na lang yung required. So this is like the exception. And then moving forward to the parking requirements. Yung parking requirements ng BP 220, it will follow the slot sizes of National Building Code. Ano nga po ulit? Yung parking lot size sa National Building Code?
2.5.
So yun, susundin po natin yung building code for that. And then, for example, for multiple family dwellings and condominiums, so every 8 units, dapat mag-provide kayo ng 1 parking slot. And then yung driveway, pwede siyang gamitin as parking area if yung minimum road right of way is maintained. And off-site parking din naman, allowed siya as long as hindi siya more than 100 meters. This is for on-site parking sa multiple family dwellings. And then we also have minimum floor areas for multiple family dwellings. So, pagdating sa socialized, 18 square meters. Pag BP 220 condominium, 18 square meters. And then economic housing, 22 square meters. So, for exits and corridors, kailangan nyo pa rin i-consider yung National Building Code and Fire Code of the Philippines because mas stringent yung rules nila. So, we have to follow that. And then, pagdating naman sa fire suppression systems, required na siya for structures more than 15 meters in height. Doon lalabas yung requirements sa fire suppression systems. So, for elevators naman, required siya for buildings 6 stories or higher. Saka lang kayo required ng mag-allot ng elevators. And the elevator should also follow the requirements of the National Building Code and the BP 344. So, yan. Pag less than 6 stories below, hindi pa required yung elevators. So that's why we have like mga walk-up apartments until 5 stories high. So yun po, that concludes our discussion for BP 220. Ano mga tanong po ba? sa inyo yung slide. Isa na lang ulit sa ano, sa yung chat.
Ano yun? Ano ba yun?
Wala. Ano, short break ba? Or
Sige, continue. Continue na natin. Ikatahay mo. So, mag-break. Continue na natin.
Continue
O,
na ba?
gusto nyo mag-break? Oo, wala. Racing nga lang.
Kasi yung susunod, maiksi na lang yung susunod. So gusto niyo muna ba mag-
Kasi may exam pa kayo.
Oh, break ka
Anas ba na pa natin to?
Na?
Pero di mo pa ibibigay sa kanila.
Hindi mo muna. Focus na lang.